Modeling and animating inside of Modo requires manipulating objects in a three-dimensional scene. The center of that scene is called the origin. In this video, I want to demonstrate the importance of modeling and animating around the origin. I've loaded up Modo, and I'm in the Modo 401 default layout. And as you can see here, you can see our grid in the background. Now, because we're modeling in a three-dimensional universe, we're going to be manipulating objects along three different grids, or three different axes. Let's create a simple little cube. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can see our cube a little bit. There we go. And I want to change my perspective to the front. Okay, here we go. If we remember back to high school geometry, 3D modeling is basically plotting points along a series of grids. In two-dimensional geometry, we're plotting points along the x, which is this axis right here, and the y, so up and down. The x goes from left to right, and the y-axis goes from top to bottom, down here. So in two-dimensional geometry, we're only working along two axes. Well, in three-dimensional geometry, in three-dimensional modeling, we're working along three axes, thus the 3D. So we add in a new axis, this z-axis that goes from the back to the front, the z-axis. So working along the x, the y, up, down, and the z, which is backwards and forwards. The intersection of all three of these axes is called the origin. And the origin is an important part of our scene because it represents the center, the absolute dead center of our three-dimensional world. The Modo interface gives us a little bit of a clue as to where that center is. If you look very, very carefully at the grid, you're going to see two black lines. This guy right here and this guy right here. At the intersection of these two black lines represent the x and the z axes. They don't give us one for the y axes, but they do give us one for the x and for the z. And at the intersection of these two lines represents the origin, also known as 0, 0, 0 in geometric terms. It's important that we model around the origin. As 3D modelers and as 3D animators, the origin is the one common element between every single part and every single part of the process. It doesn't matter if we're modeling, or if we're texturing, or if we're animating, or maybe we hand our scene file off to another animator, or maybe to someone who's going to be rendering our scene. The origin is the one common element between all of these different production pipelines. So it's a good idea to get into the practice of modeling our entire scene around the origin. There's also some added benefits of modeling our scene around the entire origin. With our object, you have a little cube here. You can see our object is sitting right there, smack dab in the center of our origin. Because we're at the origin, we can now enable some symmetry, which allows me to select one side, and the other side is automatically selected as well. So there are some advantages of modeling around the origin. But let's take a step back and pretend that maybe we didn't model at the origin. Maybe we created our cube way over here, away from here's the origin. So our cube was initially created way out here, and maybe we'll even move it up on the y. So it's just it's super away from the origin of our scene. So how do we get it over there? Well, Modo is built off of this idea of selections. Whatever is selected is going to get changed. I'm in my polygonal mode, and I'm going to double left click on my cube. Cruise over to your basic tools, and one of the options you're going to find kind of in the middle is this center selected pull down menu. If we click on this center selected, we have a number of options. Now this whole tool will center our object based off of these input parameters. So we can center just on the x-axis, or just on the z-axis, or maybe combinations of two axes. I think I'm going to go with all, which is going to center our cube both on the x, y, and z axes. There it is. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. So the origin is a big part of working inside of Modo. Get used to working entirely 100% at the center of the scene as much as you can. There's some added modeling benefits. We can use symmetry. We can use certain action centers that will orient and rotate our tool handles around the origin of our scene. So it's a good idea to get used to working around the center of our three-dimensional universe known as the origin.